A special guest, super generous for her to join us. It was kind of last minute, and Emily Jones from Moms for Liberty, Alabama. She's the chair. She's the head honcho. She runs the whole thing. She's been doing such amazing work. The whole organization has here in Alabama. I've had the pleasure of working with her on our executive committee and just seeing the work that they are doing. And so I'm really excited to bring them to you guys here today. It was a personal favor for her to take the time to do this. So, Emily, welcome to the show. So glad you're here. Thank you for coming on. Um, Glad to have you. Why don't you go ahead, just tell us a little bit, tell our viewers that just don't know a little bit about what Moms for Liberty is involved in, what they do, how they got started, and um, what we're rolling into.
Okay, yeah. So you set a really high standard already, so I'm already nervous about that. Um,
You're an overachiever.
so Moms for Liberty is a national organization. It was founded out of in Florida out of COVID, right? I mean, like all things, it seems like all these type of activities we're now doing started because COVID opened our eyes, and Moms for Liberty was the same way. So we were co-founded by two ladies that really were complete strangers, kind of similar to you guys. They both served on school boards in completely different counties, had no idea the other one existed. And as all things with COVID, they started seeing this like gigantic overreach of the federal government, and they were bold enough to stand up and say, nope, we're not doing it. So all these issues kept coming up with schools, as all of us remember, the forced masks, all that, and they just kept voting it down at their school boards. Now they lost overall because they were one of like five votes, but nonetheless, through that they kind of developed this reputation as being the one person that would stand up and say no. And over time, right, like they got connected and eventually came up with the idea of starting an organization focused on parental rights. Like, how do we arm parents to stand up and fight, to be educated on what's going on, and really know what they can be doing as parents? So they started Moms for Liberty in Florida in 2021, really intended to stay super local to their area. And as you can imagine, that just kind of spread and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And they had locations all across Florida wanting to get involved. So they decided, okay, we'll just be a statewide movement. We'll keep it here in Florida, and we'll just kind of fight the battle there. And within a couple of weeks of kind of going statewide, they had somebody from New York, of all places, reach out and said, "Hey, how do I start this within my state?" So they talked about it, prayed about it a lot, and decided, this is not our movement. This is God's movement, and He's equipping us to arm parents all across the country. So they
Nice.
started a nationwide movement in 2021 and have been going strong ever since. Here in Alabama, I started the chapter in Madison County in 2022. So we're just over 2 years old. And our big kind of claim to fame was last year, literally doing a story hour event in which Kirk Cameron and Riley Gaines attended. And we're doing our second one this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Nice.
But yeah, I got to wrap this up and head over to the library. It's a busy day. But that was kind of our big thing. Like, we'd been around for a year, just trying to kind of figure out who we were, all that. And then we did this story hour event last year, and Kirk Cameron, Riley Gaines ended up coming. The library thought it would be cute to cancel us, and found out very quickly we don't back down from the fight. So we said,
Nice.
you're going to host us, or we're going to sue you for violating our constitutional rights to free speech. So they backed down. We went from planning a tiny little event for 20 people to 600 people showing up across two locations, making national headlines, and finding myself on the virtual couch with Fox and Friends on a Saturday morning. So we've been going strong ever since.
Yeah, that was. I remember that. That was a huge deal. It was national news. It was going everywhere, and you guys, uh, you are the epitome of a mama bear. Uh, and when it comes to fighting for our kids, like, people need to know this. Like, when it comes to fighting for our kids, um, Moms for Liberty is unrivaled. They will not back down. They do not back down. and we've seen that here under Emily's leadership. Um, just you don't mess with their kids, and so it was really cool to see them stand up, and they won, and that was great. It was in our local school district too.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
it was amazing. So
I believe I was actually at the gym next door the day that all of that was happening. You know, obviously I couldn't get in at the time, but I saw everything packed, and it was really cool to see. You know, maybe one day we'll have Riley Gaines on this show.
Hey, I can get you in touch with her.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was wild, and I did not know this until literally about a month or so ago. The protest at our event here in Ruby Red, Alabama, was the biggest protest they've ever had for a
isn't
curriculum
that crazy?
at the library. Isn't that crazy? In
Hmm.
Alabama, they were so organized. That was the biggest protest they've ever had.
Yeah, one of the big things I've learned from you, Emily, is just how we are a deep red state, like incredibly deep red,
Yeah.
but the left has such deep roots in everything around us, our schools, uh, our legislatures, like everything, and it's like whack a mole everywhere we got to go. Um, and some of the things we'll be talking about in the show today were just mind blowing when you shared them to me. I could not believe this was happening in Alabama, and if it can happen here like this, it's everywhere.
Yep.
And so let's get into some of that. Like this last week, the Supreme Court had a little minor decision on Title IX. It wasn't much of a actually decision, a ruling, as much as it was a return and clarification of rules. Um, but I'm curious, uh, does that decision that they had there impact what you guys are doing here in Alabama at all?
So, not kind of indirectly. So there's kind of two parallel paths going on with Title IX lawsuits right now. So you have the Moms for Liberty lawsuit, which I'll kind of put to the side because it really wasn't impacted by the Supreme Court ruling. Then you have the state level injunction, and there are currently, I think, 26 states that have injunctions right now on the Title IX rewrite. So what had happened was all these states got the injunctions right before school started, and everybody was okay, great, this is wonderful. We kind of get a reprieve. Well, then the Department of Ed came back, federal level, came back and went to the Supreme Court and requested a stay specifically against the state level injunctions. So they being the Department of Ed, wanted the federal government or the Supreme Court to say, yeah, these injunctions are cute, but we're going to ignore them, allow the Department of Ed to go ahead and implement Title IX while everything works through the process to eventually get to the Supreme Court for a final ruling on the constitutionality of the rewrite. And the Supreme Court said that's cute, but no, we're not doing that. We deny your request on the Title IX stay. So it helped because it solidified the appeal that Alabama has to halt the implementation of Title IX currently. So that is a win. It just it strengthens the injunction we have at a state level so that the federal government can't continue to implement. It's not the final ruling from the Supreme Court about the Title IX rewrite, though. So it's a good thing by all means, but it's not the end goal that we've got to get to. So there's still a fight ahead of us. Is the short answer. This is not done. We've got to continue to be vigilant, monitoring our schools, making sure that, like some of our local county schools that I have inside info on, that are slowly easing into this rewrite of pipeline. So we've just got to stay vigilant and aware and keep fighting.
So I actually have a couple of questions. When all of this is said and done, and you guys set everything straight, are there specific policies that you guys want to impact or change? And I'm curious about specifically. There's been two really big discussions here in South Alabama. One is on uniforms, I am specifically against any uniform unless you go to private school. There's no reason to be soldierizing our kids. I don't believe in any of that stuff. And two, Baldwin County specifically just went to all kids get free lunch and breakfast if you go to school. So I'm curious if you guys want to impact any of those things at all.
Free school.
Yeah, right. Yeah, free.
Yeah.
Of course, we all know free, right?
Yeah, I am pretty sure that almost every public school got that because, again, the federal government's trying to sweeten the pot of all the wonderful things they do for you so
Right.
they can control you. We don't really have specific policies that we, as an organization, right, that we would want implemented. We just stand for parental rights. A parent gets to make these choices. Period. End of story. Like, you cannot force me to call your little boy or girl because he identifies differently. That's cool. Y'all do that in your own home. I'm not doing it. And you're not forcing the son to do it. The free lunch, free school thing, or free lunch and breakfast thing. Personal opinion, Emily, controversial mom over here. I want the federal government out of my school system. Let's handle that at state level, and God forbid we allow the church to help these kids in our community.
Oh no, we can't have that. We can't. Whoa! You stepped over the line right there. We cannot have. Oh.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I actually agree with Emily there. Leave it up to the state governments, get the federal government out. It also, gives churches and other people, the opportunity to, feed kids. Because I knew a bunch of kids growing up that, sometimes a school lunch or a school breakfast was the only meal that they would really get. So it obviously is important, but at the same time, the federal government just needs to, get the hell out. It's time to just give states more power. And as Mark would say, that's federalism, folks.
Yeah, I'm totally for if specific counties. I am more than willing to personally pay more in property taxes so all the kids can get fed.
Right.
And I am all for the state saying, "Hey, we don't want to do that. Let's do it county by county basis."
Yeah.
All for it. I'm all for it.
So years ago, I was a member of junior league. So during COVID, to your point, all these kids are only getting fed when they're at school. Well, what happens when you're not allowing them to school? They're going hungry. So the junior league here in Madison worked with the local church, and the church would collect donations. They would pack everything, and then the junior league was actually on site at the school and would distribute bags of food to parents, kids, and it was basically just kind of car line, right? Like the car would pull up and it was, how many kids do you have? Okay, and you would hand them X number of bags. So we do have communities that will step up and do this, but they don't have to because big daddy government's handling it all. So 20% ish of our Department of Ed or education budget in Alabama is from the federal government. We can get rid of it. It's not that big of a number. Get rid of it. Handle it ourselves. We can do it.
Yeah, I've long time said that the rise of the welfare state was due to the failure of the church to fulfill her duty.
Amen.
Like, we are supposed to be the ones who care for our neighbors and take care of our communities, and the sense of community in America has just really crushed and fallen, largely because the church has not been doing her job. And so I'd like to see more efforts to bring that back in. One really good example of that happening is in Florida. They have that Hope Florida program that Casey DeSantis runs, and it's all it is as far as the as far as their state government goes, they've built a website, and that's their involvement. The rest of it that website is designed to do is to coordinate all of these churches, all of these charities, all these organizations that can help on a various amount of topics. So anybody who's in need of anything, go to that website. They can select what their issue, what the things categories are that they need help with, fill in those details, hit submit, and it will send their information to these groups that will reach out to them and provide that care. What an amazing asset! Like, gets the state out of it entirely, and brings back the function of the church again. And so I'd like to see something like that happen here in Alabama. Yeah. But back onto Title IX stuff. Here in Alabama, you've been doing a lot of work with Representative Susan DuBois, and she's already gotten past some amazing legislation and working on some others that you guys have been helping with. Can you talk a little bit about what has been going on there and what the roadmap looks like?
Yeah. And I actually need to have a side conversation with you on some new things we're doing with her.
Let's go.
You'll love it. So Susan, like Mark said, like she's been doing phenomenal things, and this is her second year in the legislature. Like she's still very
Crazy.
new. I think it was her first year as an official representative. She filed legislation that basically kept men out of women's sports, and she got it passed. I mean, talk about coming out strong. Like she hit the ground running, and she's really not let up. So for 2 years now, in 2025, it'll be the third year. She's filing legislation to basically define womanhood, manhood. What is a woman. And she's fought really hard on it. It's just unfortunate we have a legislature, I should say, that doesn't feel that it's necessary we do that, which is very disheartening. But she's trying really hard to get that done. She's working with several different organizations. Alliance Defending Freedom's helping her this year. But from a grassroots perspective, right, our role is to make sure people are aware, educate them, and get them motivated to get behind all of this. So we've been doing Title IX town halls. We've done 2 so far. We've got one coming up here in Madison in September. We're potentially working one in Florence, and then we're working some stuff in Prattville that'll be a different little spin to it.
Cool. Tell us more about those Title IX town halls. Like, what's happening in those, and how do people find out about them?
Okay. So basically, it's an education session specifically about Title IX. So we're going through what does the Title IX rewrite, and then Susan's talking about from a state level what she's doing to pass legislation to stop that. AG Marshall has been at the past 2 and talking about what we've been doing to fight back at a state level in terms of lawsuits and all of that. And then we've had representatives from Alliance Defending Freedom coming to really talk more to the parent side of it, because great, we've got state injunctions. What if schools are doing it anyways? What does a parent do? How do you fight back? And ADF's been talking about that a lot. So it's really informative. We have some handouts because it's also a lot to take in too. But it's really just talking about all those different things. So Title IX redefines sex to be gender, right? So if Bobby wants to be Sally, you got to call him Sally. And everybody has to do it. The schools don't have to notify parents if a child transitions. They do not have to tell a parent if a child says, I really think that I want to go by Jenny now. Schools have to do it. They can't push back.
And this is in Alabama.
This is in Alabama. It's everywhere. Every school all across the country. If your kid, like I have a 9-year-old that goes to public school, if he misgenders somebody, he can get hit with a Title IX complaint at 9 years old because he misgendered somebody.
I would do it on purpose. I would misgender everybody.
I make shirts for my son that defy it all, because I'm like, no, you're going to deal with this school. You're not going to get to hide and be like, oh, just, we're stuck. No, you're going to deal with it. I will force the issue. So I am that defiant. My poor child, God love him. But the thing that nobody realizes, Title IX, like it deals with all these things, but it also impacts teachers. So if a teacher goes home on their personal Facebook and puts something up there that talks about how I don't believe in transgender, someone at school can then come back and file a Title IX complaint because their coworker did something on their own time, on their own computer, and used their free speech.
That's total BS.
Yeah, like it's
total
so
BS.
Constitutional. Yeah, like it's insane. So those are the things we're talking about, because nobody's talking about that aspect of it. And there's a whole piece in there that talks about abortion being a civil right. So if you're taking federal funding at a college, you're now going to have to provide abortion services, or you're not compliant with Title IX regulations. This is
unreal.
Yeah. But nobody's talking about any of that. So that's our big focus, is helping people understand, like, big picture, like, what is this Title IX rewrite and how absolutely absurd it is. So it's unconstitutional, and it violates so many of Alabama state laws. So it's wild. It's crazy.
I love that you're putting shirts on your kid. That's a total controversial. That's a total controversial mom thing to do right there.
Right?
Speaking of controversial moms, you've been engaged in a massive library war, not just at the local schools, which has been happening at the local schools,
Yeah.
um, but even in our community. Like our county library has been full of drama. That's been making headlines and news as well.
Yep.
Um, Curious if you can talk to us a little bit about what you've been finding in our schools, the regulations on those that you found. It's
Yeah.
disgusting,
Yeah.
and a little bit about the county libraries as well.
Yeah. So I'll start with public schools. So in Alabama, we have a law that says K through 5 cannot discuss gender ideology in a public school. It needs to be K through 12, but for right now, we're K through 5 and we're taking that. Um, Getting into public schools to look at library books is really difficult. Some people may be able to do that. I've not asked. I've not been able to do it because I've not asked. So let me be very clear on that. But what I do have full access to is the Chromebook that my child is issued by the school.
This
So
is where it gets crazy.
it's insane. It's just, yeah. So in our district, right, every kid gets a Chromebook. I assume it's that way across the state. I don't really know, but our district for sure they get it. So my son brings his school book or his Chromebook home one day because he tells me, right, he's like the little spy. He comes home and he's like, "Mom, guess what I saw today? So and so was reading a book and it talked about lesbians or whatever it was." Like he is such a snitch to his
Wow.
How old is he?
best.
How old is he? Oh no, I would not be able to contain myself.
It's awesome. So I'm going to sidetrack. They had this little event last year at the school called Rock Your School or something. It's like a school-wide party. It's great. And it was
Yeah.
like game themed. So like, do y'all remember the board game Operation when we were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mhm.
They had that in the school. So my son comes home and he's like, "Mom, I have something juicy to tell you." Literally said that word. And I'm like, "What's up, buddy?" He tells me about this game and he's like, "It was a naked man." I'm like, "Well, give me some more specifics." So he's going through it. So I'm like, "Okay, like it's actually okay. Like it's just a board game." Like, so I had to like talk him off the ledge. But man, he thought he had come home with like the best story ever, and I had to burst his bubble. It was so cute. I loved it. But this is what
Oh
I do
man.
with my son coming home with like, "Guess what I learned today?" So yeah,
Mm.
he came home telling about some books that he had seen on another kid's Chromebook. So we just kind of start going through it, and there's it's an app really called Epic. And if you go on Epic, if you know how to search for stuff, you can find just a plethora of books that talk about, or in videos, I should say, that are pushing the LGBT agenda. So we found one specifically that was a little boy, Jack, not Jackie, is the name of the book, and
I've heard of that one.
little girl turned into a boy, and it kind of goes through all the stuff. And I contacted the principal, and I'm like, "Hey, like your policy says that if there's a book concern, like you fill out this form." So I sent it to him, and short version is he had no idea this was even on the Chromebook. Like Epic's just there. They didn't request it. They don't monitor it. It's just there. It's kind of a COVID thing, right? Like kids are virtual. Here's free books.
And to jump in on that too, like the principal at so my kids go to the same school that Emily's do, and that principal he's a good principal. He really does try to look out for his kids. But like I said, it's whack a mole. They are sneaking stuff in that administrations don't even know about, and so even those administrations that want to help fight this, uh, it's coming in ways that they can't even see. They have no idea what's going on, and so it really requires parental involvement in doing that.
Big time.
And so, but sorry, I was like, even in where they're trying to help, this is how diabolical it is.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's a good point. And the principal's wonderful. Like I really don't have a lot of issues with him, or any for that matter. He does try really hard. And he didn't know the answer. Like he called me probably within 3 or 4 days of getting the complaint and was like, "I have found very disturbing stuff on here. Like this is not okay." And I'm like, "Yeah." And like, because mine is limited to what my son has access to. So
Mhm.
Presumably the principal has much more access. So whatever he saw, he never told me, I never asked. It was concerning. So he contacted the district curriculum person and the superintendent. They didn't know it was there. So it
Yeah.
was just through, like Mark said, like parental involvement, kind of poking and prodding and finding something, and then they did take care of it, thankfully. And it took a little back and forth because they don't own the app, right? So how do you control an app that you're not buying that's just there? So they did figure out a
Check
way
your kids' stuff, people.
to
Check your kids' stuff.
Yeah,
bring.
I mean, this stuff is definitely important because I have a 1.5 year old, so I'm not going through this yet, but I will be in a few years. And my wife and I have come across a bunch of things on whether it be YouTube or other apps where we run into content that is supposed to be kid friendly, but it just has a bunch of stuff in there that we just don't agree with. I remember a few months ago we were watching Blue's Clues, and there was like a gay drag parade going on Blue's Clues. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, he's not watching Blue's Clues anymore. Or, he'll watch the Blue's Clues that I grew up on with Steve, where it was
Right.
not controversial at all. And even now, with Miss Rachel, we limit what Miss Rachel episodes he can watch because obviously we want him to learn and have those tools available, but at the same time I don't want him in a year or two to be like, is that a boy or a girl? And I have to say, well, that's a confused person. But yeah, it's definitely important, and I am really glad that there are people like you out there fighting this fight so that in a few years when my son has to go through school, hopefully a lot of this is taken care of and is out of the school, so I don't have to have a lot of these conversations with principals and administrators because I don't think I would have the same level headedness as a lot of people do. I will lose my temper when it comes to my kid.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of the challenge, in all honesty, because as moms, as women, we don't go there, right? Like, oh, I don't want to be that parent. I don't want to be that mom that they all talk about. And then we sit down, we shut up, right? Because traditionally, right, like moms are the ones that are helping with homework and engaging with the schools and all that. So we don't feel comfortable going and saying anything, and then it just gets swept under the rug, or like in this situation, right, like it's just mounted for decades because moms didn't want to speak up and say anything. So it definitely takes a shifting of the mindset of, if not me, then who? Because for decades
Yeah.
nobody's done it. It's time to get past that uncomfortableness and just be that parent, be that mom. It's okay.
It's true, but it's also like indicative that men have not been doing their role either.
Yep.
And so, as fathers, um, we need to step up to into those into what we've been called to do. And so, um, yep. Um One of the things that you had taught me about, and I wanted to get onto that while we're on this topic, is you found a solution to some of this through your work with Kirk Cameron and a whole nother, like most schools right now use Scholastic books,
Yeah.
but you found a whole other program that helps librarians that want to do the right thing and protect these kids. Can you talk a bit about what that is that you found and how parents can help try to bring this about in their schools?
Yeah. Um, so like Mark, you're saying, Scholastics is kind of like the Goliath when it comes to school libraries, school book fairs, all of that. And if anybody paid attention, it was about a year ago, I guess. There was the whole issue with, I guess, Scholastics removed LGBT books from their offerings for book fairs, and there was obviously backlash. Scholastics then came out in reverse course and said, we're not going to do anything to remove this material. If you have a Scholastic book fair, you get our material, no filtering whatsoever. And it puts the onus on the school librarian to go through it and figure out what's allowed, what's not allowed. I really have a major issue with that because, like Mark said, our kids go to the same school. The librarian there is really good. She's very thorough. It is not fair to ask a librarian to review every single book that comes through for a book fair to determine if, in this situation, it is in line with Alabama law or not. The book titles are misleading. The book title, Aiden Becomes a Big Brother, sounds innocent. A librarian would look at that and put it on the shelf. It's about a transgender kid. So you violated state law, librarian, because you put it on the shelf. That's not fair.
Yeah,
It's
and
ridiculous.
we just saw that down near you, Frost, I believe, South Alabama. There was a whole library that shut down for a full week
I,
to
I
bring
don't.
in a crew to go through book by book by
I
book.
I do recall reading something about that in my local news, but I don't remember if that was Baldwin County or Mobile County, or it might have actually been like a little bit north of us. Um,
Dark or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
may have been. I do recall reading something about that recently.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
a lot of BS. That story
so
is just there's no. That
yeah,
was
it's unfair on those librarians. It's unfair in the community. It's terrible that this stuff has sunk in there.
yeah.
Emily, you had stumbled on something that I found was absolutely horrific, and you had shared the actual policy and mentioned how widespread this is. But the gender ideology um, events that are happening in these schools, specifically, one of the things you talked about was um, how the counseling is mandated
Yeah.
one on one with our children on gender ideology by the school staff. Can you like talk about about that a bit? Because that was unreal when you mentioned that to me and you produced the receipts, and I'm still shocked. Again, in Alabama.
Yeah. So just slight little correction. It's not one on one. It's large group.
Okay.
So it's still bad, right? So in Alabama's an opt-in state. So we're one of like two, I think, in the entire country, which means schools cannot have counseling conversations with a child unless the parent says yes. In most states, it's the exact opposite. You have to opt out. So when you register your kid, they're already automatically enrolled into a mental health counseling program. You, as the parent, then have to go to the school, request the forms, figure out how to complete them, return them to the school, force them to accept it, and then follow up to make sure your kid's pulled from the class. We don't do that here. When you register your kid, it's my child will attend, my child will not attend. As you can imagine, I chose not to send my child to this counseling class, but they sent them anyways. So as Mark and I said, like our principal is really good. So I contacted him directly and just said, "Hey, my son went to this class. It's the beginning of the year. It's a mistake. Like I get it. Don't worry about it. Let's just not let it happen again." And he came back and said, "Well, that's for specialized counseling. This is large group counseling. You don't have an option. It is mandated by the state that all kids go to group counseling in public schools." And I very politely said, "Well, that answer is not acceptable. Try again." And he went to the district, and I don't know if it was the superintendent or who it was, but they too came back and said, "Yeah, you don't have a choice. It's mandated by the state. It's a state standard, right? Like you've got to have it in order to graduate school." I call BS on that because last year I sat down with the principal and the counselor and asked very basic questions of, "Well, you're not giving him a test, so what are you going through in class? Because I don't see any paperwork coming home." "Well, we don't take tests." And I said, "Well, if you're not taking tests, then how are you assessing my child to a pass fail standard?" "Well, there's no pass fail standard." And I'm like, then how do you have him in a class and say it's a standard that he has to meet if there's no expectation to be met? "Well, we just observe your child." But I still have not processed that one. What are you assessing him against? How do you determine if he's passing or failing? Like, so it's very weird. I haven't quite figured it out, but to date, I now go to the school, check out my child when they go to that class, and he and I have mommy Kevin time, and that's it. He's not going to class.
It's it's unreal. You pointed out that it wasn't just happening in our local school district. It's every school district in the state, and
Yep.
then worse, it's nationwide. Um, that these things. So this is again in full red Alabama. This is curriculum. This is required policy that is snuck its way into our schools, even with administrations and uh, principals and leaders within the school district that would like to fight this. It's still there. Um, so it's incumbent on parents uh, to really get involved. Like Emily mentioned, that it's really hard for a mom to to be a controversial mom, to stand up and assert themselves because she's in that community day in and day out, and you have to build relationships and working for relationships with your teachers, kids teachers, in the administration, um, and even with other moms in the community, we're all raising our kids for these schools. Um, and so it's hard for parents to step up and do that, but they need to. They need to start asserting themselves, and it's becoming a real battle. We're seeing um, parental rights being trashed and infringed upon left and right. In Alabama, in Florida, right now, we see this Amendment 4 situation going on where they're pushing abortion. But one of the things that they've done there is in Florida. Um, Florida has a law already that says for any surgery for a minor child, they have to get parental consent. They do not let children consent to medical procedures there without the parents' involvement. However, this Amendment 4 changes that. It changes the requirement for consent and reduces it to notification for abortions. So they are enabling children, they're stepping in as the state to be the one consenting on behalf of the parents to allow the children to go ahead and have abortions. And all they can do is just notify the parent, we're doing this. So
And sadly,
we're
it's not
seeing,
just Florida.
yeah, it's not just Florida. We're seeing it not just in, we saw Missouri too. Same kind of thing. Um, but here in Alabama, we're having a lot of things going on in parental rights, and you've been fighting that battle left and right. Let us know what you're dealing with there, as far as what's how are parents being overstepped, and then how can we reassert ourselves?
I mean, I think a lot of it's parents just need to have better conversations with their kids. I mean, honestly, that does not happen often enough. Parents just they're not engaged. I mean, right? Like, I mean, I'm a single mom and I work full time, so I get that it's difficult and it's not easy to find time to do it. But you kind of have to. I mean, worst case, you're going to get really cool stories from your kid going like, "I have a juicy story to tell you," right? Like, you're going to get some really good laughs out of it along the way. But I mean, it's everywhere you turn, whether it's the doctor's office, right? So in Alabama, medical age of consent is 14. So you're talking about the abortion thing, Mark. At 14,
Isn't
your
that
kid,
crazy?
yeah, at 14, your daughter could go get an abortion, and
Yeah.
nothing you can do about it.
I think the question should be at 14. Why is your daughter having sex?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
at 14,
At
she's
14?
birth control. I mean, like, and the school has to help if she were to go
Yeah.
out. Like, what the hell? Like, I'm
I'm
just
sure the reading material in the libraries has nothing to do with that.
Oh, yeah, oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So here's a fun little fact. New
Well,
Jersey.
they're not reading, so
Well, they're looking at picture books. Don't worry. I got plenty of
Mhm.
depictions in there. So New Jersey is a very blue state. They just passed a law this past year that brought medical age of consent from 16 down to 14. So I have a lady, a counterpart with Moms for Liberty up there, and she's, like furious that they've dropped this to 14. And of course they're fighting it. And I just laughed and I'm like, yeah, it's been 14 in Alabama for decades. Like, I hear you when you complain about it, but at least you had it at 16 for a while. We don't even have that here. So
In a deep red state.
in a
That's
deep
just
red
what we
state,
do.
right? And by the way, legislation has been filed for years to change that, and it can't even get out of committee, right? Like, our deep red legislators that care so much about protecting our children will not even allow the legislation to get out of committee. Like,
What,
insane.
why do you think that is? Like we see similar silence or inactivity. We're seeing it spread like wildfire. In Florida, that Amendment 4, it allows abortion up through birth. It infringes on parental rights. It lowers the standard for healthcare for women. Like, it is so corrupt, so horrible across the board. But the GOP there is largely silent on this issue. Like, it's being fought by activists. It's being fought by us, and so across the board we're seeing that. And so the issue you point out here, where things that should just be no brainers can't get out of committee. What's going on within our GOP, within our party, within our community? Like, why are these representatives so feckless?
Come on, Mark. You know the answer.
So
You know the answer.
all
On
money
certain issues.
Alabama, and I'll put you in touch with the right people on this, Mark, so y'all can have conversations and maybe bring them on. But in Alabama, it's strictly money. I mean, it literally comes down to insurance providers in the state. And if you raise that age of consent in Alabama to 18, I think it knocks it down to, don't quote me on this, but like 6 insurance providers in the state. So it literally comes back to money. I mean, and that's sick, because what positions are you putting parents in, but also kids? Like, I pray to God that it's not happening, but if a 14-year-old girl gets pregnant and she wants an abortion, she's ruined her life. I mean, she physically will go on, but at some point when her brain is fully developed, she's going to go, what did I do? And you don't recover from that. You don't. But the insurance providers, man, they got a lifelong customer full of antidepressants, anxiety, all the things. So yeah, you're selling our country's future out for some money. Like, it's sick. It's twisted.
Yeah, we have to we got to figure out a way to find fighters in our legislators, and to promote those.
Personally, I want politicians that aren't career politicians.
Amen.
When I see politicians like Thomas Massey, who has a bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering, and he had a job before he was a congressman, successful, had a family, everything, and then decides to run, that tells me, oh, this person doesn't care about money. He cares about his country. But then when you have other people that are career politicians who have been in there since day one and are worth millions of dollars, it kind of just makes me not want to trust them.
So what's your thought on Tommy Tuberville?
You know, I didn't vote for Tommy Tuberville at the time, because I guess I was sort of just pissed off at Trump and the MAGA Republicans that I just didn't want someone who was a football coach in there. That being said, you know, the only time I've ever voted Democrat in my life was when Roy Moore was running for Senate, and I voted against him because I wasn't about to, vote for someone who had very credible claims against him. But at the end of the day, we were already a red state, and it was, it wasn't a full term. So it didn't really affect me much. But Tommy Tuberville has surprised me in how well he's done. Katie Britt has kind of done the opposite. So, we'll see.
Yep. From outside looking in, I'm not trying to talk trash about an Auburn coach, but I'm going to roll Tide. That man has done nothing but enrich himself, and he is a sack of crap. That's what my personal opinion.
What we have going on across the board again is this constant push to get conservatives out and bring populism in, and so we as conservatives we have a lot of work to do to bring in people that are grounded in deep institutions we have, like family, like our faith, like the rule of law, and bring these things back to prominence within our party. And so there's a lot of us working towards that, and there's a lot of activism going on. And Emily's been on the forefront of that here in Alabama. And Emily, you've part of this program called See You at the Library.
Yep.
That that's dealing a little bit with that activism. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So see at the library is all about public libraries. So we deal a lot with Moms for Liberty about school libraries, but public libraries are a disaster if anybody's not been there. And I say that as a person who has not been an avid reader my whole life up until Moms for Liberty. I don't think I even had a library card because I just did not go. But once I got educated on what was going on, it was kind of that you can't turn a blind eye. Like silence in the face of evil is evil itself.
Right.
What's going on in our public libraries is absolutely disgusting, and it's paid for by our tax dollars. So that makes it so much worse. And our city councils don't care. Like they just kind of pass the buck and they say, "Oh, library board has to decide all that. We can't control the library board." Even though they appoint the library board and they do fund the libraries, they don't want to deal with it. Um, so the public libraries are quite an interesting little situation with the crap that they have in there. We were talking about that story earlier with a library shutting down because they had to look at all the books. It's really not that difficult. They're making this into much more than it needs to be in order to protect kids. When you have a one room library, it shouldn't take you a month and a half to go through the books. Like you should know what's in your library because you approved it to begin with.
Yeah.
They're trying to make a story out of all of it. But See You at the Library, it's part of Brave Books, which is a book publishing company for kids' books that focus on like true conservative family values. Kirk Cameron's kind of their spokesperson for it. They do new books almost every month, and it's usually co-authored by someone that's really big in a conservative movement. So Riley's got a book out. Jack
And
Posobiec's got a book.
yeah, they're good books too. Like my daughter loves Riley Gaines' books that she's gotten there. She reads them, loves them, wants more of them. Was jealous that I got to meet her. So yeah, they're really impressively good. Whoever is working with these people, like Riley. Riley's a swimmer, right? You don't think of her as an author, but the team that they've got together there, Brave Books, they're helping put out this material. It's just really good. The kids love it.
They're quality books. They're a little on the expensive side, but for me, it's worth it because it's an investment into a conservative movement, and I can get on board with that. But we're doing a book today by Bethany Hamilton. If anybody remembers her, she was the surfer that had her arm bitten off by a shark.
Yep.
So we're reading her book today, and it's titled something about be brave or something. I can't remember the exact terms, but it's really cute. So we're going to do our second annual See You at the Library today and read that book. And it's really just a wholesome, truly family-friendly event at the library. No drag queens, no LGBT stuff, none of that. It's just solid stand up for your values, be bold, be brave, and hopefully.
So is this something that's only happening in Alabama, or is this a national movement? See you at the library.
Yep, it's national movement. So last year, I want to say they had about 150 locations that did it. This year, they're about 350, so they've grown a good bit, and they're in all 50 states this year. So last year, they were missing a couple, but this year they got all of them. Hawaii was one of them that they got. So they've expanded. The goal is to continue to build year after year, and eventually get to the point of doing, I think, at about 1,000. The goal this year was to do a Guinness World Record of the largest story hour in the country. So I think they're kind of like all the different story hours will come together as one in terms of numbers and all that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of it.
When is that going on? Like, how do we get into that?
It's today. The one here in Madison is at 2. The one down in Baldwin, you missed it. It was at 11 this morning. But if you're in Madison, 2 o'clock, it'll be fine.
Nice.
All the fun things and protesters, because you can't have a Moms for Liberty event without a protest.
Yeah, game on.
I'll protest. I'll protest. We need to have a Dads for Liberty too.
Yeah, for real. All those controversial moms are doing all their work, and the dads. I'm frustrated. Like I really am. I really feel that we this country is suffering because men have really failed to stand up and be men. Um,
Well, they've been beat down,
and so,
right? I mean, like toxic
yeah,
masculinity, like yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
crazy. We need to
Uh,
bring back alpha males. Yeah,
I
y'all
was
get a shirt. Bring back alpha males.
I was hey, yep, we
I'll
might.
go ahead and design a shirt that says that.
yeah. You just
You
talk to the
design
two
it and I'll
guys that
have it
can
printed.
make that happen.
I was actually talking to my sister about
I like it.
the current state of our culture, and I'm not trying to talk about her business on the podcast, but we were specifically talking about people getting divorced, and I think in Madison County right now, or in Huntsville City, whatever, it's what is the same thing. They're still seeing divorce cases from 2020.
Oh my gosh.
So if you file for
Yeah.
divorce today, you won't even see the judge for 2, 3, 4 years.
Because
Like,
there's so
Yeah.
many? Like, why?
because we have a judge problem in North Alabama. So I used to work for Madison County Sheriff's Department, and we had a shortage of judges then, and that was a decade ago, more than a
Hmm.
decade ago, 12 years ago, and it has not ever changed. Now, the judges that we do have, most of them are really good, and they work very hard, and they process, but one person can only do so much work before they get burnt out.
So I have a dumb question. How do you get a judge shortage? Are there not like set numbers of judges and like people aren't
So,
like
so this how it happens in the state and federal is that most of the time a judge has to be appointed by the governor, the president, the senate, whatever. I don't know if it's different from state to state, but at least on the federal level, they get appointed by the president, and then the senate votes on it.
right?
So if there's nobody to vote on it, or they refuse to vote on it, or you have somebody like Tommy Tupperville, and they just want to, blockade it and stop it, nothing
Well,
you can do about it.
so
Can't do anything.
a part of the big part of the shortage that's going on, like Emily, you may not know this, but our local magistrates are not actual judges. They don't even need a law degree to be a magistrate. And so even within Madison, it's not an actual judge position. And so these these people are getting into these offices that do not have that qualification or that background, because the city councils, the county commissioners, and so on are allowing that requirement to be removed from policy, and from statutes. And so that's something that, on the local level, that we need to fix and address. We have a shortage of judges because the policy and legislation is not requiring it. It's lowering the standards. And so, a lot of the things we see with bad decisions that are happening on who gets sent to prison, and who gets released, and recidivism, and all of that, all falls back into place here, that we have a massive lowering of standards in this country.
Yep.
And
have a culture
unfortunately, unfortunately, we also, the bigger issue is we have a massive reduction in people in the citizenry upholding their civic duty.
Yep.
We don't show up to vote. We don't show up to council meetings. We don't show up to school board meetings. We don't show up to executive committees. Like we have a massive uninvolvement, apathy issue going on, and power abhors a vacuum, and something is going to step into there. And unfortunately, right now, what we have happening are unqualified, low standard gaps being filled. Just terrible things. So part of that shortage is because it's just not required.
It's wild.
Yeah. So I guess my whole point in pointing out the judge thing and talking about divorce and all that stuff is that so my sister she's not quite conservative, and she's not a leftist either. She's very centric in thinking, putting her policies and her thought process, which is quite all right. That's perfectly fine. But we came to the agreement that we have a serious culture problem, and it's not just in the United States. It's like the Middle East likes to call us the West. We have a huge culture problem in the West. So Europe, Canada, United States, Mexico. It's anywhere where the West has impacted daily life. It's bad. It's bad. We need men to be men. We need women to be women. We need kids to be kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen.
Preach, Ross. Preach.
Trying. That's hey, look. I don't have any kids of my own yet, Emily. Me and my wife have been married for 3.5 years, and we have been trying for 3.5 years. We're slowly getting there. And my number one priority is kids. Number one point. That's why I said I would be glad to pay more money in my property tax to make sure that those kids eat a breakfast and lunch at least every day.
Yep.
Kids are the number one priority, and that's
As they should be.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that's even in our preamble. Like, like the whole purpose of government, the whole function of government. In the preamble to the Constitution, it says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, so how we come together as a country, how do we come together as disparate states, and what all that entails. In order to perfect that and make that better, the next few lines down says, we do establish. So we've come to make this agreement together to establish this thing. And why? Why have we done that? And it said to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, to our children, to the next generation, to secure liberty for that. And we're getting near the end of this podcast, and I just want to thank Emily for the work that you've done to secure the blessings of liberty for our kids. It's been powerful. It's been awesome. It's been educational.
Doing the Lord's work right there.
Yep.
But you had one more bullet point. I don't know if we got to it. That you mentioned that you might want to discuss, and that is activism. Like, how do parents and families and moms get over the fear of being controversial and step up and become active in their communities?
I struggle to answer that because for so long I couldn't figure out how to do it. I think that kind of the trigger point is what you're most passionate about. For me, it's telling me that I can't do something or I have to do something. Like I have to send my child to counseling, even though he's perfectly fine. That was the trigger point for me, that I said over my dead body. And then I really didn't care what people said. I was very happy to be that mom. So I think that's really the overarching thing, is just educate yourself and find what it is you're passionate about. And through that, you're going to naturally find that role to be active. And for some people, it's a public library. I support our mission on public libraries. We need to fix it. It's not what I am most passionate about, but for some of our group, it is. So I think that's the big thing, is just find your passion, find a way to get active on it. Because if you don't stand up and fight, no one will. I mean, so many people sit around and are very content to support you in your role, but they won't do it themselves. So you've just got to step up and do it, and know that you're not alone anymore, right? Like there's a whole army of people out there that are not only fed up and willing to fight, but they've got your back when you do it. So that's the big thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's that 238-year-old quote where, what kind of government do we have? What kind of system do we have? And it's a republic if
you can keep it.
Can keep it. And so it's on us. Emily, thank you for coming on, making the time.
That's fun.
Yeah, you've taken us to another level on this podcast.
Yeah.
Really appreciate
We're only going up.
Well, I'll put you in touch with multiple people, Mark. And I've got an email for you that I can pass along. So hopefully,
good deal.
If nothing else, I can get you some more guests to come on, and just like you said.
So how do people follow the work you're doing with Moms for Liberty, and also just the local community stuff that you're involved in? How do people support you and follow you and help get the word out on the work that you guys are doing so they can be a part of it?
Easiest thing is just Moms for Liberty Alabama. even if you're in Madison County, whatever county you're in, just go to Moms for Liberty Alabama on all social platforms. We're there, and then you can connect to us through there. I try to keep all the Madison stuff on there just because it's easier. Those are all public pages, so it's out there. So that's the easiest answer.
Good deal. So to our followers, please go give her a follow, give her a boost. You're going to find she's a wealth of information. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Everything that she's discussed, and this is one thing that we didn't get to put onto this particular production, everything that she's discussed, she has the documentation to back up. Like she has the receipts. And so not only does she have them, she knows how to get them. And so feel free to reach out to her, and when I ask her the questions, she will tell you how to do that yourself, and where to go. Just such an awesome resource. And we're so lucky to have you. All right, fellas, you got any other questions?
So
Things you
I
can think of
did.
you want to mention?
Last thing. So I did have to find that AlabamaAL.com article that I was reading about that library, and you're spot on. Ozark. It's southeast Alabama, and they closed down July 18th until like August 20th. 8,000 books they had to go through, the whole 9 yards.
Is that the article that came out like 2 days ago where the librarian said, "I'm sick and tired of looking at books"?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Literally,
actually sent it to the boys, so they'll get to read it as soon as this is done.
it is your job to look at books, people.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is, I'm tired of looking at books. I don't care what's in it. Your child can pick up a book and be exposed to abortion at the age of 7 because I'm tired of looking at it.
Yeah.
Great.
Sadly.
Insane.
Yep.
Yep. So for our viewers, we have our website up now. It's thebeardedfederalistshow.com. It's plural Federalists because there's three of us. So it's thebeardedfederalistshow.com. You'll have all our latest episodes on there. You can come watch and see this episode there. And we even have a donation link. And so this does cost us some money to put together and stand up. And we would appreciate any support that you can give there. But on that note, it's been a great show. And once again, Emily, thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you guys
Yes,
for
thank
tuning
you.
in and watching.
All right. See y'all.